These are called the tridactyl beings because they have three toes and three fingers. They're tridactyls. Um, and there's a few things about these mummies that are very interesting. Aside from the fact that they have three fingers and three toes, they have elongated skulls. They have overly large eye sockets, really, really big eyes. They have really small noses. They don't have ears. They have like little holes for ears. And lest anyone think that these are gray aliens, they have like large, protruding, puckered ape lips. And if you go back to the other view where you're looking down at it, you'll see what I mean. Um, so they're really, really well. You can't really see there, but I have a bunch of pictures. I should have sent you some more, but you can see the large eyes at least. Um, the thing that makes this credible is there have been a number of teams, and this is what the professors at the University of Ica told me. There's been a number of teams who've come to test these mummies.
Everybody, make sure to hit that like button, smash that subscribe, share the video with all your friends. Come find me, x.com/shotgunmine.
I'd like to ask you just about the so-called alien mummies, these three-toed mummies over here. I got a couple of pictures. What's the basis of these? Is it more Mexican paper mache or what?
Not this one. So first understand that there's a lot of misinformation about these things on the internet, and some of it's disinformation, purposely put out there, not by the government, but by the guy who actually discovered these mummies, because he doesn't want people to know where he found them and the circumstances that he found them in. I have been in communication with him, and that's another story. But so allegedly, no, let me walk that back. I'm not going to use the word allegedly here. I think it's now known and has been confirmed that about 150 mummies were discovered in the Nazca Desert, in the area of Nazca, or somewhere, Palpa, Nazca, Ica, that area generally speaking, some years ago. When I say some years ago, probably 7, 8 years ago. Maybe even more. I don't remember when the original discovery was made. So these are not new. They've been around for a long time. Gaia TV has done a bunch of, documentaries and stuff on them. Other people have done documentaries. But much like that story about those structures under the pyramid, I sort of backed away from this, and I did not want to get involved or comment on it, and I wouldn't for years. And I've known about these mummies at least going back to 2018, 2017, somewhere in there. And I was even I was in the desert where they were extracted, where they were discovered on another project years ago, back in 2018, 2019, and I just didn't want to have anything to do with it, with these mummies, because there's too many hoaxes so especially in Mexico and Peru. Those are like the two biggest places where hoaxing is an industry. It's an industry, making these kinds of, fake mummies and stuff. So I didn't want to comment on it until I could actually go and see these things for myself. And I had the opportunity to do that a few weeks ago. And I was invited by Professor Zuniga, Dr. Zuniga from the Museum of Ica, to come and take a look at these mummies. Now, the University of Ica has 5 mummies, and I only gave you pictures of the larger one. They call that Maria. Some people are calling it Mario now. At first, they thought that it was a female. Now they think maybe it's a male, and some people are saying it's a hermaphrodite. But aside from Maria, you have 4 other mummies, and some of them or 3 other mummies rather. And those are the small ones. And I don't know if do you remember the small ones that were all over the news that Jaime Maussan in Mexico unveiled?
The 12 inches.
Like at a press conference, he had them in they looked like he was in like shoe boxes. They were these little mummies, and they had those too. So I saw those as well. But I wasn't really that interested in the little ones because I'll give you my first impressions, okay? And I'm making a video about this as well that I'm going to put on YouTube, and I haven't really processed all of my thoughts about this yet. I'm still researching. I'm still thinking about what I saw, and I talked to the professors at the university. I interviewed Dr. Zuniga, and I'm just processing all of that. But my initial reaction was when I walked up to to Maria, to the large mummy. My first thought was, oh my God, that's real. That was my thought. I think this is real. And I don't have any scientific reason to say that. That was just my impression. And I'm pretty incredulous, as I said, especially as it pertains to artifacts from Mexico and Peru. But this one, like, viscerally struck me as real. Like, this was alive. This thing was living and breathing and walking around. Okay. But when I walked up to the next to Maria there, you can't see it, but behind me, there's the smaller ones. They're like, I think they're what, 2 feet tall. They don't look like that. And you can't, there's one behind me there. You can't see it. And I thought immediately, these don't strike me as real. Like, they weren't living and breathing. Their bone structure's wrong. The joints look weird. I just can't imagine this thing walking around. But that doesn't mean that those small ones aren't real artifacts. I think they are. I think they're effigies. I think they're dolls, effigies that are supposed to represent the big ones. They have 3 toes and 3 fingers as well. These are called the tridactyl beings because they have 3 toes and 3 fingers. They're tridactyls. And there's a few things about these mummies that are very interesting. Aside from the fact that they have 3 fingers and 3 toes, they have elongated skulls. They have overly large eye sockets, really, really big eyes. They have really small noses. They don't have ears. They have like little holes for ears. And lest anyone think that these are gray aliens, they have like large, protruding, puckered ape lips. And if you go back to the other view where you're looking down at it, you'll see what I mean. So they're really, really, well, you can't really see there, but I have a bunch of pictures. I should have sent you some more, but you can see the large eyes at least. The thing that makes this credible is there have been a number of teams, and this is what the professors at the University of Ica told me. There's been a number of teams who've come to test these mummies, and specifically the large ones. And I should say that the University of Ica only has 1 large one, but there are many more. There's like, I've been told there's like 7 to a dozen of the large ones. And the other ones are in other collections. And, that's all very misty in Peru because there's some legal stuff attached to it. But this is the one that the University of Ica has in their possession. And on this one and on others that are like it, mummies of, let's call it the same species, there have been several highly scientific teams, several professional scientific teams that have come from various countries to analyze these mummies. And there have been a team from the United States, for example, and they've taken MRI, X-ray, and DNA samples, and they've even dissected some of the fingers. Some of the mummies, both small and large, have implants that are made of gold and different kinds of metals. And there's a very interesting alloy called osmium that's been discovered in these implants. And osmium, it's not really, they don't ever discover it in ancient artifacts. It's a metal that's only been known for, I think, about a decade. And osmium is only used today in communications technologies. That's the only use we have for osmium, or at least its primary use today. And the implants were found to have tissue and bone growing over them. In other words, they were added while whatever the thing was alive. So there's just mountains of data, and Dr. Zuniga went over all this data with me, and it's difficult to argue with the data. Now, I'm just, to give you my conclusion here really quick before we run out of time, I'm leaning in the direction now of these things, not the small ones. I'm only talking about the larger ones, Maria and her like. I'm leaning in the direction that those are real. That, again, those were living, breathing creatures. They were sucking air on planet Earth at some point, walking around, specifically among the Paracas and Nazca people. And I'm leaning in that direction. Of course, I'm not closing the door to a hoax because it's Peru, so I can't do that. But I'm leaning in the direction of these things being real, as many people are. Again, these have been around for almost a decade now.
Timothy Alberino giving probably the best summary and story of the Nazca Mummies of as anyone has ever done to date. So a great watch. It's only in this little section as far as this video goes. This is on Timothy's YouTube channel, but he is basically posting an interview that he did on someone else's YouTube channel. Let's see, he's got to say who it is. Timothy Alberino joins Frank from the Quite Frankly podcast to discuss newly discovered megaliths in the Amazon, the alleged alien tridactyl mummies, the Nasca Mummies, and structures beneath the Giza pyramids. So, yeah, I'm always interested in whatever Timothy Alberino is doing. He's one of my favorite ufologists. And he's not really a ufologist. Right? He is an ancient aliens guy. He is a giants guy. Like, I think how most people probably come into his category is, you know, he studies giants and all of the stories and peoples and places that say that there's been giants involved, and he goes there, and that's his thing, right? He talks about it, gives interviews about it, writes books about it, goes to places and films it. And so he's in direct contact with all these people, and he is all over South America looking at pyramids and holes and artifacts and giants. And so one of the cool things that I saw Timothy Alberino do was the face peeler stuff going on in Peru, and it was because he knew kind of the area and knew people in the area that he just grabbed a bunch of people and went there as soon as that happened. So he was kind of the Western reporter on the scene for the Peruvian face peeler incidents like a year and a half ago. And it's kind of for the same reason and why people kind of come to him about the Nasca Mummies. It's because he kind of knows the area, the people, right? And so this is fun. It's fun to hear him kind of give the whole story. And I think his story of the Nasca Mummies is the same as most people's. That when you first hear about it, it sounds like the same old junk from that part of the world. Jaime Maussan, Peru, Mexico, anything that has to do with those three categories in ufology and ancient occult lore and all that stuff. If it's got anything to do with Peru or Mexico or Jaime Maussan, then it's automatically kind of suspect because there's so much fraud. And as he describes it, there's a whole industry in Mexico and a whole industry in Peru that has to do with selling aliens and also selling ancient artifacts that are both just kind of, you know, manufactured, made up, and they're shipping them out. And so that's what he thought when he saw these mummies, is that these were just one of the same. And that's exactly what Jaime Maussan has been involved with in the past, is that he was either part of the nonsense or he was fooled into thinking some of the things that he had were real, and he came out with them, and it was like the boy crying wolf, right? Because when they cut open those mummies dolls, inside were llama skulls and infant bones and stuff like that. And so now he has a black cloud over him, and that plus Peru plus Mexico plus all the other shenanigans makes it hard to even get into the subject of the Nasca Mummies because of all of that other nonsense. And so, you know, Timothy Alberino lays all that out and says all that, and then he says, so I've kind of stayed away from it. These things have been around for maybe a decade now. People have been talking about them and asking about it, and mostly people not been paying attention to it, including him. He hasn't been getting too involved with it at all. But now there's been 10 years of scientists going down there and taking pictures of them and scanning them in every way possible and cutting open pieces of them. And now, now it seems like these big mummies, which there's hundreds of them. Timothy Alberino thinks that at some point he says in there, he thinks there's as many as 150 to 200 of them. And they're all over the place now. They're in all sorts of different universities being studied. And everyone's coming up with the same stuff. 3-toed, 3-fingered lizard creatures that look like they're walking around on 2 legs with implants, with metal implants in their hips, in their chest, and other places that are implants. They're in their bone. It doesn't seem like they are talking at all about some jewelry that they left on their ear too long or something. That they're implants, and the metals that they're made out of are interesting to say the least. So that's kind of the Nasca Mummies. So he does a really great job of describing all that. I think at the end of his story, the Nasca Mummies, basically where he's at is he says, well, now I don't think those little ones, the tiny 1-foot ones that we saw in the shoe boxes in the Mexican Congress, those are probably just dolls that were for either they're effigies, they're dolls or effigies or both. So they're dolls for the humans or for the little lizard people to play with, or they were effigies for the humans of the little lizard people. And none of this really seems to have much to do necessarily with UFOs, because what they do next is they make the jump. And we don't know any of that stuff as far as UFOs and aliens. But we do have these lizard people mummies, which are really weird. Gonzalo Chavez, he's, one of the main guys, all day, every day, grinding away at Nasca Mummies, and pretty much never skipping a beat. No matter how much he is brushed aside, and no matter how much you talk shit about Jamie Maussan, Gonzalo Chavez is still pushing this thing hard. Does he say he has been developing a research site for the effort led by Jose Mantilla and Jaime Maussan? Tridactyls.org. This website's fun.
Maria is real, authentic. This is confirmed by scientists and specialists. It is one of 20 bodies found in the Nazca Desert in 2016. The Peruvian Ministry of Culture has never reacted, and since then, the government of Peru has only devoted itself to disqualifying.
It's all your basic stuff, all in one place, really. I mean, these are great videos. They're all short, they're all succinct. I think even if you're not a ufologist, you probably lose yourself on this website for a few hours pretty easily. And it's worth a look. I've been saying now for years that if they could get the Jamie Maussan kind of stigma off of the whole topic, then they would start to profit. And that is just now starting to happen. Even though all this science stuff, all these science people have been making these videos and talking about these things for a long time, it's just now starting to get over kind of the Jamie Maussan speed bump. Jason Wilde, one of my favorites to watch. Let's see here, this is X. This is a great synopsis of the whole Nasca Mummy situation. The Nasca Mummies are not just a weird discovery or an unexplained anomaly. They are proof that humanity has been living alongside other intelligent species far longer than anyone ever imagined. Discovered in the Nazca region of Peru, these small humanoid mummies were initially dismissed as elaborate hoaxes, but with the most recent DNA testing, carbon dating, and anatomical studies conducted by international scientists, the evidence is undeniable. These beings are over 1,000 years old, their bodies preserved in desiccated state by the dry conditions of the Peruvian desert. More importantly, the genetic analysis reveals something right nuts. They share a portion of their DNA with humans. This isn't speculative. Multiple laboratories have verified that while they have some common genetic markers with us, their overall genetic structure is distinctly non-human, with sequences that don't match anything else on Earth. The best it's described is as part reptile. It does great deep dives on pretty much any topic, so you get a lot in a really little place on anything that he's posting. So definite place for a nice summary of the Nazca situation. It says we need to stop pretending this is just an elaborate hoax. The Nazca mummies are real. Their DNA evidence, combined with clear anatomical differences and the context of the discovery, proves that they weren't just the product of human imagination or ritual. They were beings who existed, walked on Earth, and possibly shared knowledge with early humans. And if their existence has been proven, it means everything else we've been dismissing as myth or folklore deserves a second, much closer look. Nasca Mummies, they're hot stuff. Go get some. Timothy Alberino, one of my favorites. Love to see you talking about giants as always, but getting into the deets on the Nasca Mummies. And it's, you know, it's like it's a little bit of a relief for him to say personally that, yeah, even though Jamie Masson is involved, even though this is in the heart of Peruvian Mexican culture, even though we have all these other things where we would normally dismiss this topic, he's not dismissing it. Good times, Nasca Mummies.